Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, can President Joe Biden unify our divided country? The General Assembly is back in session with new leadership and new challenges. The County Council faces budget issues, the need to replace the MCPS superintendent, and how to balance equality and equity at the same time. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by former County Council member Mike Knapp, and the Secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. "2021 will bring new challenges to Montgomery County. The COVID-19 pandemic prominently remains unabated. Government's attempts to control or stop the spread of the deadly disease is at best a limited success. The countervailing pressures of increased spending in response to the pandemic and a decrease in revenue is being faced by this council for the first time as the fiscal 2022 budget is being prepared." Mike, Adam Pagnuccio, writing for the website Seventh State, predicts that the fiscal day of reckoning is near. You were on the council during the Great Recession. Is the county executive and council equipped or prepared to deal with this crisis?
I think they're really facing a unique challenge for Montgomery County, and I think some of them are aware of it, but I'm not sure people fully understand the depth. Just this last week, the county executive introduced a $25 million savings plan, and which seems as though he's taking a responsible approach, but at the same time, he's still paying $4 million per pay period for folks who are county employees who are working during the pandemic. And it's the only agency in county government that's actually still doing that. And so rather than try and find $25 million in savings, he could actually reduce or end those additional payments to those workers and effectively solve that problem. But even with that, we're already looking at a reserve, taking the county's reserves down from 10% to 7%, and to fill the gap that will remain after that. If they don't do anything, they're not assuming any growth, and there'll still be a nearly $100 million gap in the budget. And with that, our reserves will be down to 5%, which becomes a really interesting challenge since Montgomery County for the last 30 years has maintained its AAA bond rating, primarily because we've maintained a significant reserve. So, I mean, there are a lot of challenges there. And so, people start to look at this and say, either, yes, you should use a reserve. That's what it's there for, is a rainy day. But the bond rating agencies are probably going to look upon that unfavorably, which means people are going to say, well, gee, we should raise taxes. And unlike almost any other time, there really aren't any increased revenues coming in. And that's going to be a real challenge. I'm not sure people are fully appreciating that yet.
Well, and in addition, there are other hidden problems. And Mark, the politicians don't seem prepared to address or recognize some of these problems. For example, in my industry, which is real estate, there are hundreds of small residential landlords who are saddled with non-paying tenants that can't be evicted. Right now, there's a moratorium on foreclosures, but when that foreclosure moratorium is lifted, we can potentially see thousands of people being challenged as to whether or not they can keep their property. In addition to the number of people that could be evicted under landlord-tenant actions. Our hospitality industry is decimated. There's not going to be any tourism in the metropolitan area for years, and there are predictions that it won't come back for 2 to 3 years. How are we going to deal with this transition over the next year?
Well, we've talked about it maybe in a sort of a sequence. So as Mike talked about, sort of the immediate budget issues, which are need to get addressed. I wonder, we certainly could have a conversation about the rainy day fund, because I do think if ever there was a rainy day, this is a rainy day. And right. I think the idea of bringing up the rainy day in 1 year back to 10% is probably more than just a little ambitious. But the longer term issues are the fact that Montgomery County and the Washington area, which has been so dependent upon location and basically charging a premium for being located here, close to the government, close to various services, that's no longer really as strong an appeal. And secondly, for commercial real estate, lots of people are looking at cutting back the amount of space they have. So I think we're going to see over the next couple of years a significant spike in vacancies, and that's going to have a impact on real estate revenues because it's going to flatten the value of the real estate in Montgomery County.
The commercial office market is going to be severely damaged and weakened. Industrial and retail has been hurt because of the restaurants. But before we go to our next topic, I wanted to talk. We do have a vacancy. Superintendent Jack Smith has announced that he's resigning, and that a nationwide search is going to be conducted. Mike, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, first, I think it's a great loss. Jack Smith, I thought, brought a real personal touch to being superintendent and was good at recognizing and addressing the issues in front of us. I think some of the issues for confronting Montgomery County were so significant that it's hard for anybody to get in front of them, but rather than kind of bury them, Jack has been very good at putting them on the front burner and make sure they're paying attention to them while developing strategies. I think one of the challenges is going to be is he's leaving for personal reasons, and I think they're valid and legitimate, so I wish him well and wish his family well. They're just going to be rudderless at a time when it's going to be very challenging to be rudderless. And I think the deputy superintendent may be the interim, but I think it's going to be an interesting challenge. He's only been back in the county in a leadership position for a year.
So we may have to go over just a minute on this because I want to talk about the COVID vaccination issue with Mark. Mark, the other night there was a town hall meeting in the county answering questions about the vaccination program. There was a lot of frustration expressed during that meeting. And in fact, one person who asked the question said at the current rate of 3,000 people per week, it would take 2 years for all of Montgomery County to be vaccinated. So what is happening there? Other counties, and I have to say, even Prince George's County are doing a better job than what's going on here.
Well, anecdotally, there have been also challenges in the whole sign-up process, the websites of setting up appointments and in matching the categories of people who are being given priority with the availability of the vaccine. I do think that 3,000 number is probably a little, maybe I'm a little rosy or overly optimistic, but I do expect that as production of the vaccine is increased, and now we have every expectation that it will, that we won't be talking about 3,000 a week, we'll be talking about a higher number and being able to capture them. But you're right, there's huge frustration with people trying to get appointments. They're spending hours and hours on the computer trying to log in and get.
Well, Mark, the worst part is it's a lot of the sign up times go unfilled. This is the real tragedy, is that the way it's structured, it's so tightly structured. People aren't going, and they're not able to go, and then those that are able to go can't get an appointment. It's really very, very poorly run. But we need to go on to our topic and talk about what's going on in the General Assembly, because they reconvene for their 90-day session with an agenda that stresses social justice and issues like police reform, restoring funding to the Kerwin Commission, and addressing inequities exposed by the coronavirus pandemic, including making the tax system more equitable. Mike, the state lost a historic leader when former Senate President Mike Miller passed away. Are Senate President Bill Ferguson and Speaker Adrian Jones up to the task?
I think they're up to the task, and you're right. We lost a giant in Mike Miller. And, it's always challenging to come in and try to fill that void. Fortunately, Bill Ferguson, as the current Senate President, had an opportunity to be able to come in and kind of get his feet wet and could actually take some of the tutelage from Mike Miller during the intervening time before Mike passed. And so I think that was a benefit. But I think that's going to be a challenging year. The one thing that bodes well is that the governor came out with his budget yesterday, and by all accounts, all sides are recognizing this as a very solid effort that everybody can work with. And so I think certainly that makes things easier for Adrian and for Bill this year, because they're starting at a good point. They're not starting at a point of animosity. And I think that's important, especially given the other challenges that are out there.
Well, thanks. Mark, The General Assembly, Governor Hogan announced his new budget at 49 billion, which is a $1 billion decrease from last year. There's a lot of grumbling going on in the General Assembly. One delegate wants to increase the taxes on capital gains. I don't wonder if she realizes that capital gains in Maryland are taxed at the same rate as ordinary income, unlike the federal tax system, which gives a discount for capital gains. But isn't this just another disincentive for businesses in Maryland going forward?
Well, several of these taxes are taxes that would put Maryland at a competitive disadvantage. Lowering the estate threshold, the way estate taxes, that's one of the things that drives many retirees out of the state to be able to go to states that don't have that. There was a proposal to do a 1% increase to 10% in the liquor tax, and we already talked about the hospitality industry and the way it's been hurt in the restaurant industry. It may be a small amount, but it's absolutely the wrong signal. But it's also the wrong signal when you realize how close so many other states are to Maryland, the border to Delaware, to Pennsylvania, to Virginia, to West Virginia, depending where you are. It's just the wrong message.
So, Mike, there's one issue that I think concerns me. It was a headline in today's Washington Post. It said that the Maryland House Speaker, Adrian Jones, wants to enforce a black agenda on the House of Delegates. Doesn't that send a divisive message to Marylanders that we're black and we're white, we're not unified, we're not all Marylanders?
I don't know that I would necessarily have framed it that way, but I understand why she did. I think one of the challenges that we have to be able to do is to understand that from a policy perspective, we haven't necessarily taken all of our residents into account, and we need to go back and look at whether it's funding or policies, how do we make that more inclusive? And whether that's that agenda or the other, I understand why she framed it the way she did, but I think it's really more important to look at how do we go back retrospectively and say, did we take all of our residents into account as we develop these policies? And if we didn't, how do we make sure we make modifications so that everybody can be successful?
Well, it doesn't. I mean, in your experience as a legislature, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you, when you were considering legislation, you're considering how it'll affect the entire population, not just a specific racial category of the population?
But when you look at the populations that we have excluded in many of the policies and laws that have been passed over the last 200 years, I don't know that we've necessarily gone back and said, how do we give everybody the ability to move forward? And how do we make sure that we've made some of those corrections that we just have never readily addressed? I think we're much more cognizant today to try to be as inclusive and to take an equitable lens that we have in the past. And even with that, I'm not sure we're doing a great job.
Well, you're going to have the last word talking about the General Assembly. When we come back from this short break, can President Joe Biden bring unity to a divided country? Stay tuned. And welcome back. In a speech that was directed at a very divided nation, President Joseph Biden called upon the country to unify. And while his speech stressed the need to come together, very many specifics as how to bridge the chasm that exists in our country. And like many, I struggle to articulate why the nation is so divided. I mean, I look at in my lifetime, I've gone to several inaugurations and I've never seen our country in such rough shape personally. So Mike, is the divide political? Is it social? Is it philosophical? Is it all of the above, and where can we start to bring the country together?
I think it's political and social, but I think it's most social more than anything else. I mean, I really think that whether it's looking at the geographic distribution of people, red states versus blue states, more educated versus less educated, I just think economics comes into play, and I think that we've created perceptions of what we think the other side looks like. And we haven't really had a lot of conversation with the other side, whoever we perceive the other side to be. And so I think part of it's going to be, how do we just show leadership? I've been really pleased at some of the signs over the last couple of days. Quite honestly, just the fact that before the inauguration, President Biden went to church and had a bipartisan group of congressional leaders who joined him there. The fact that we were in a church and there was a shared mission that they were there together. I think we need to have more and more examples like that of people talking to each other and engaging. And I don't think that's going to break the logjam right away out in the rest of society. But I think if people can at least begin to model that behavior, it gives us something to look for.
Well, I appreciate that, but I want to go to Mark on this because there are mixed messages being sent out. While the President of the United States, newly elected or newly inaugurated President of the United States may call for unity, you have the Speaker of the House of Representatives calling the outgoing President of the United States a criminal felon who should be prosecuted criminally. And in addition to that, we have independent organizations deplatforming former President Trump and other conservatives on social media. And this has caused many on the conservative side to worry that the fundamental reason and the fundamental light of America, our freedom of speech, which is guaranteed by the Constitution, is under attack, and many are going to be snuffed out.
Well, I think that it is a fear. I think it's frustrating that so much other conservative dialogue has been swept in the pushback that took place as a result of the assault on the Capitol. But I think we really need to separate those two things out and recognize that they're different and allow a continuation. Look, I full disclosure, I have an account on Twitter. I also have an account on Parler. I'm not on Parler these days because it got shut down by Amazon, and it was shut down by Amazon because they didn't do screening. Well, I think sometimes there's a room for having a space in which dialogue can take place where there's not screening, and that's really an inappropriate requirement to be had.
Well, I will tell you what worries me, and I look at this, and I'm a Republican. I'm a conservative. What worries me is when I see people who have attended a rally, like the 100,000 that attended the rally last week, and 1,000 of which may have been violent or may have caused the attack on the Capitol. And then you have individuals who innocently went to that rally who are losing their jobs, who are being targeted and singled out. It seems to me that there is an effort to stifle conservative speech. And there was no effort last summer when you saw the rioters going on across the country, as well as last night on the Democratic and left side. That causes great concern.
I think one of the challenges is, and we've got to figure out how to address this is, and I agree, that we have to have a place where there can be conservative speech, liberal speech, everything in between. But the falsehoods that were out there, when 70% of a certain party believes that there was fraud in an election, when there was nothing to indicate that, there were 63 court cases that were tried. Not to say there aren't anomalies in virtually every election, because there are, and we've talked about that before, but we've got to be able to there's a difference between being able to have speech that relates to philosophy and thought and speech that is falsehoods and inaccurate. And how do we ferret that out? Because I think that's the challenge, and that's a hard one to figure out. How do we sift between those 2 points?
I'm going to let Mark answer this, but the question is, that's very a great point. That's well taken. There was a lot of falsehood surrounding the post-election arguments as to election integrity. But conversely, there were 4 years of charges that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, was a Russian agent. And those after investigations, those charges were proved to be false and unprovable, and they're still being made. So where are we going to have a truth issue? Who's going to be the decider of what is true and what is not? Mark, I'll let you answer.
Well, I was going to say, going forward, one of the things I think we need to do as a society is kind of and the sort of tit for tat. Certainly Republicans need to do this and I say that in response to the Russian allegations, is the tit for tat seems to be that since the other side did X, Y, or Z, therefore your side is justified to do something that you really wouldn't want to have happen, but you're doing it in response. And I think going forward, that's something that we really need to kind of stop collectively. Maybe go back to the golden rule of treating each other the way we would want to be. Because you're right, one of the things that happened as a result of the allegations about President Trump was this sense that somehow you could just, how shall I say, create an alternative reality and stick to it because the other side had their own alternative reality.
Well, I think it leads to the worst in all people, is that you really are so suspicious of not being treated fairly that you are preconditioned to assuming the worst. And I think that certainly was played out over certainly over the last 2 weeks. I mean, I was so dismayed and upset about what occurred at the Capitol. I mean, I worked at the Capitol. I love the Capitol. I attended my first inauguration when I was 8 years old. So I mean, the idea that we would have people breaking into the Capitol was just a terrible, terrible thing. But we have to find a way where we can have common language and an agreement on some comedy. And I don't know which side is going to go first. And hopefully there will be a signal from the President Biden, that he really truly does want unity in the country. With that, we're going to take a break and go to Parting Shots. And welcome back. Now with Parting Shots, Mike Knapp.
Well, thanks. I guess one of the things that I would like to just say out there is I'm intrigued by how people are trying to, which we talked about, this, getting vaccines is challenging, but we're also trying to find people who are trying to jump the queue and get in front of everybody. And the thing that we do know is until we get to about 75 to 80% of the entire population getting the vaccine, it's really not going to make that much of a difference for us collectively. And so I would urge people to go when you're supposed to. If you're eligible to get the vaccine, please do get the vaccine. And if it's not your turn, wait, because it's not going to work anyway. So let's just hold out till it's our turn and let's wait in line and get it when it's available. And ideally, sometime in the next 5 to 6 months, we'll all be okay.
Thank you, Mike. I certainly hope so, because I have a wedding in August and I want more than 50 people to attend. So I'm pulling for you, baby. You go. All right, Mark Uncapher, your parting shot.
Thank you. We talked about it earlier tonight on the show. Jack Smith is leaving as the superintendent for MCPS. It's really unfortunate that the circumstances. He has an ill grandchild. His wife has left to be in Maine, where his grandchild is recuperating from open heart surgery. So our thoughts are, it's unfortunate that these are the circumstances in which he has to leave. We appreciate his service during the prior 5 years as superintendent, but we look forward to picking somebody new who can address the challenges of our school system and address the issues of inequality in particular that we're facing.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Mike. My thoughts as we wrap this up is that there has been a change in the administration, and hopefully a change in the rhetoric. The level of rhetoric is not on full boil anymore. It may be on a moderate simmer. And I hope that produces certainly constructive results, not only in our federal government, but also our state and local governments. They say that all politics is local. It really starts with us at the community level. And I hope that we have comedy as we go forward in the future. I want to thank the panelists for being here. I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.